This year is an important year for Battlefield as we have the introduction of Battlefield 5's Firestorm mode. Now, for those of you who simply aren't aware, Battlefield 5's Firestorm is of course the Battle Royale segment of Battlefield 5 that will be featuring in the game. We don't know a lot about it, but we know it will be part of Battlefield 5 and free for everyone who owns the game, but we do know that it's being led by the group of developers at Criterion Games, some of the guys that worked on the space battles in Star Wars Battlefront 2 for example. And that's really exciting because Criterion are a brilliant company, and some of the guys I've personally met over there over the years or so when doing development with games like Star Wars are really good guys. I'm really excited for what they have to bring to Battlefield at the moment in terms of Royale mode. And we've seen this become a mega genre. Royale is huge. We're talking games like Fortnite, PUBG, Realm Royale, H1Z1, and it's safe to say that this is its own genre now. It's established itself in gaming and it's here to stay. Even games like Call of Duty adopting the recent Blackout mode is just an acknowledgement that this is a genre that people are interested in playing and a genre that is going to stick around. And although these genres are separate, shooters and Royale games are very different things in many respects, I think it's safe to say they feed into each other and lots of people are really excited for a Battlefield version of Royale. But there is a big sticking point with Battlefield 5 that today I would like to discuss, and also discuss just how hopeful I am for what this can achieve. So what exactly is that sticking point? What are people talking about when we talk about Battlefield 5's Firestorm mode, and why is there a cause for concern? Now, the cause for concern with this is simply that Battlefield 5's Firestorm has not been announced as a standalone. We currently know that it's available in Battlefield 5, which is fine to some respects because the game has been discounted in places, but it's not available to buy on its own. Now, you can look towards games like Call of Duty and say, hey, that's fine, lots of people bought Black Ops 4 for Blackout to be its own thing. And whilst that is true, Blackout is much different from Black Ops 4 as a basic thing, and I imagine it will go standalone at some point because it incorporates so many different elements of previous Call of Duty games. It quite literally is maps stitched together. And although we know Firestorm has its own map and it has all the normal things you'd anticipate from a Battle Royale game, it's not evidently clear that Battlefield will eventually allow this thing to be its own game, its own standalone mode that people can perhaps purchase beyond Battlefield 5. And I think this is something really important that is actually going to be critical to how well Battlefield 5 performs, and more importantly, how well Firestorm performs. This is something that's going to be huge for the game, and I think lots of people are going to play it, but at the same time, I think it's something that definitely needs a standalone installment or some form of way to purchase the Battle Royale segment separately. And I'll explain why. So first of all, the genres aren't exactly the same thing. You know, people will always play Royale for Royale, and people will always play Conquest for a game of Conquest. They're not going to take away from one another, and they're not going to, completely detract experiences from one another, because they're two very different things. One's respawnable, it's fast-paced, one's slightly slower-paced and only has one life, for example. And these two genres, although they seem to be very beneficial to one another, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have people who play Royale games willing to purchase a shooter to play that installment of the Royale game. And whilst it's probably true that lots of people do just play Call of Duty for Blackout, I strongly believe that Battlefield fares a much better chance with its Firestorm mode being more successful if there is the ability to purchase it separately. And another reason I think this is pretty vitally important is because you can actually get players to feed into Battlefield 5 eventually down the line by showing interest in Firestorm. I personally believe with the bad reception of Battlefield 5 that Firestorm is actually going to have a significantly better reception than the actual base game, and I think it can grow and expand very much beyond the limitations of the original game that's been released. And because of that, I think there's opportunities there to allow Firestorm to feed in to purchases of Battlefield 5, not just as a base game, but if it were available to buy as a standalone, make the option available for fans of the standalone Firestorm mode to purchase Battlefield 5 at a discounted rate. So for example, sell Firestorm for £20, and then if the game is for, say, retail £50, you subtract that £20 should they want to buy it directly through Firestorm, meaning that they can purchase Battlefield 5 from Firestorm, and if you own Battlefield 5, of course, you do have access to it as well. Another important reason for this is because of the Firestorm / Royale genre that we're talking about here, I feel there really is a big opportunity for Criterion to take this much beyond the scope of Battlefield 5. You know, in 2 years' time when we're talking about another Battlefield game, something different, and that isn't really all that far away if you think about it, what will happen to Firestorm? Is it just going to immediately die? Because I don't believe that Call of Duty will allow Blackout to all of a sudden just disappear from the scene when the next Call of Duty game is released, nor do I believe they'll spend excessive time and effort developing a new Blackout for the next Call of Duty game. I think it's one of those things that will become a progressive live service, and I think this is exactly what needs to happen with Firestorm, which is a very valid reason for why it should be able to be purchased standalone. I think Battlefield 5's Firestorm doesn't even need the Battlefield 5, it should just be referred to as Battlefield Firestorm. And once that becomes the case, you have the option and opportunity there for developers at Criterion Games to really take this thing to a different scope. Let's say, for example, the next Battlefield game in 2 years' time is a modern installment. Well, let's say the devs at Criterion decide to release a brand new map with all of the modern weapons of the brand new game. And I think with the potential for popularity here for Firestorm, it would be a goddamn shame to let it release in March and then have it slowly die and wither because it's constantly locked to the scope of Battlefield 5. Whilst we're off talking about Battlefield 6 or Bad Company 3, the last thing we want is all this effort from this development team to just disappear. And I think what makes this really exciting and really important for this game to be a standalone is purely the fact that there is a big open market. You know, H1Z1 came onto the PlayStation 4 scene despite Fortnite being so incredibly dominant and swallowed up 1 million or 2 players. They did incredibly well considering that, you know, most people didn't believe Battle Royale games had any space between Fortnite and PUBG. Realm Royale has done a very similar thing, it's taken a spin on the genre, and I think that's done really successfully too. But what makes this really important is that a lot of people do recognize EA and DICE as a company that will probably be able to do Battle Royale relatively well. And of course, if it's Battlefield based, then you have sort of the idea that this is going to be gritty, it's going to be team placed, it's going to be, you know, a survivalist thing. It's going to be closer to PUBG than it will be to something like Fortnite. And I think, you know, there's a huge market for games like PUBG in the Royale scene because people are looking for, you know, gritty experiences with real weapons that handle in certain ways. And I think that's exactly the market they'll be targeting, and I think it's really important because of that it's able to be purchased alone without the necessity of Battlefield 5, but an option to subsidize it. I think the second, you know, this exploded on the scene, every Battlefield fan immediately thought, well, it would be pretty damn cool to see a Battlefield Royale at some point, because we can picture what the gunplay of that would look like. We can picture the Battlefield gunplay in a Royale ecosystem, and that looks appealing, that looks attractive, and I think that's something that's an exciting prospect. But there is the big concern that this could be incredibly limited by potentially being tied to Battlefield 5 indefinitely. So troops, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Do you believe that Firestorm should be able to be purchased separately from Battlefield 5? And is it something you're excited for? Because I'm really hyped up for it, and I think it can be, you know, a really interesting and brilliant addition to the Battlefield game at the moment. As always troops, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you again soon in another video.